Put down that camera and strap in. It's time for a new episode of TogChat Live. Get ready for 60 minutes of wall-to-wall photography, including photo news, tips, and your photography questions in real time, with answers from your host, Olympus Visionary Joe Edelman.
Hey gang, that's me. How's everybody doing? It is Wednesday night and it is time for another live edition of TogChat. As always, gang, I'm Joe Edelman, your host, and we're going to be here for the next 90 minutes talking about all things photography, where my mission is to help photographers like you develop a solid understanding of the hows and whys behind great photography. So, as always, please do me a favor, just a quick thumbs up and a share. Let your photography friends know that we are streaming live on YouTube right now. You can go ahead and hit that share button where it is down there, okay, right underneath the video, or you can go ahead and share the link. I'm gonna type it in right here, tog.chat/live, okay? And of course, the last thing, a lot of you are already doing it, check in. Let me know you're here. Let me know where you're from. I got Jim here from Maine. Chuck's here from North Carolina. I got Robert here from San Antonio. Nick from Maryland. William in Ottawa. Caleb in Austin, Texas. I got Santiago in Virginia. Jeffrey all the way from the UK. Dave in Alabama. It is awesome to see all you guys. Thank you so, so much. So, where do we start tonight? We've got a bunch of stuff here. The good part is, let me tell you now, I don't have a lot of questions in the queue, so type in. What do you want to talk about tonight? What's on your mind? What should we discuss? Better yet, what are you struggling with? What problems can I help you solve? But just to catch you up on just a couple little housekeeping things, let me go ahead and switch the screen over here really quick. We are coming into, whoa, you like that? That is the wrong screen. Don't you just love when that happens? So here, let's go back to that. And then let's see if I can get the right web browser into the screen here. You know, son of a gun. So bear with me 1 second here, guys, and we'll get that back. I want to show you some websites for some events that are coming up. So let me go ahead and sneak that one in. We're going to take that off of there, and let's see if we can get the right version of Safari in here, okay? So we're going to try that one, and that's not it. So let's go ahead and try this one. Oh my God, and that's still not it. All right, bear with me 1 second here. We're gonna make this work. We are, okay? There it is, okay. So that's the one that I needed. All right. Now I can switch this back. I can lock that. All right, we're good. So coming up the end of this month, okay, and DMAC is asking the question, am I going to New York on the 24th? Actually, I'm going on the 23rd, but I will be at Photo Plus on October 24th, 25th, and 26th. Now, they haven't posted all the information yet on the Photo Plus website. In fact, I'll share that with you guys. So seriously, aside from me being there, right, let's talk about Photo Plus for a second. For those of you that don't know, Photo Plus is the largest photography trade show in the United States. There are basically three big ones every year. In the wintertime, there is Imaging USA that always happens in January, and that next year is going to take place in Nashville, Tennessee at the Gaylord Resort. And then in February in Las Vegas is WPPI, which is the Wedding and Portrait Photographers International Convention. That happens this year at the Mandalay Bay, the end of February. And then there is Photo Plus every October, which happens at the Javits Center in New York. Photo Plus, hands down, the biggest, especially for the trade shows. All the camera manufacturers will be there. All of your equipment manufacturers will be there. There really is, honestly, there's no better opportunity in the United States to be able to get your hands on gear, to see all the latest gear, to see what's available. And honestly, here's why I like to go. I mean, obviously I'm going to go and I'm going to be presenting and all that kind of stuff, and that's fun. But what I love about Photo Plus, every year at Photo Plus, I manage to find new gadgets, toys. And I don't mean toys to play with, but I mean things that are going to make my job easier, that are going to save me time and simplify things that I'm doing. Gadgets grip accessories, stuff that I've never even imagined before, and I didn't know it existed, right? That's the great part about it. So anyway, I will be opening the show Thursday morning on the 24th with a photo walk. And then I will be presenting at the Olympus booth on stage Thursday, Friday, and Saturday at 12:30 p.m. And I'm so special, they're giving me a whole hour. So we're going to do some pretty crazy stuff. This is going to be stuff that is, let's just say it's different than what you're used to seeing me do. It's going to be portrait stuff, but we're going to do a lot of light painting, not the kind of light painting that you've seen, but some new and very different light painting. And let's just say that there's a possibility there may even be some climbing involved. I'll let you figure that out when you get there, okay? So anyway, that's the end of the month, 24th, 25th, 26th. If there's any way for you to get to New York, trust me, you don't want to miss that show. It's a great show. And then the very next weekend, cross country in Seattle, actually Linwood, Washington, which is just above Seattle, Washington. I'm going to be at the Kenmore Camera Digital Photo Expo, which on the West Coast, Northwest especially, this is like a huge event. This gets like 6,000 people over the course of 2 days. So it's a pretty big deal. So I'll be presenting both days for Olympus. In fact, I'll give you guys the link for that one. If you're out on the West Coast, you definitely want to check that one out. And then the following week, so I've got 3 like crazy weeks coming up. The following week, I'm going to be in Dallas, Texas. So I hope to see some of you guys from the great state of Texas, Fort Worth area, Dallas area. I'm going to be doing an event for Competitive Camera. It's an all-day portrait and fashion photography event. So all the details are on this link that I'm sharing there. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to have models to work with, all that kind of stuff. So that's the stuff that I got coming up. I definitely hope that I get to see some of you folks along the way. But out of all of those, as I mentioned, if there is any way for you to make it to Photo Plus, you don't want to miss that one. You really don't. It's a great show. And you can keep track of all of my speaking and traveling and all that kind of stuff. If you are hoping that I will make it to your area, there is the link in the chat window. It's joeedelman.com/edu, and that will keep you up to date on that. Okay? All right, so I see some really good questions coming in. Keep them coming. We don't have a lot, so seriously, like, what do you want to talk about? But I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning tonight. And let's see here. The first question we had came in was from Jean-Edward Calvino. In my opinion, he is asking, what would be the best approach to educate a prospective client when they ask for raw files with the reasoning they're more flexible to work with? Well, okay, so let's take a big step back on that question, because that's one of those questions that immediately photographers are like, raw files, they're like the negative. I'm not going to give up my negatives, yada, 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 yada. And there's a lot of chest pounding and thumping and all that other kind of stuff. So let's take a step back, right? What do we know? Raw files indeed are your negative. That is your original file, right? So if we kind of look backwards to the film days, back in the film days, a photographer never wanted to give up their negatives. Now, I'll tell you very honestly, back in the 1980s, because I'm that old, I was one of the few photographers in my area, the Philadelphia area, that was willing to do what they call work for hire, meaning a client would hire me, they would pay me a day rate that was generally considerably more than any of the other photographers offering similar services. But in exchange, they received the original material, the negatives, or the transparencies, which was usually the case because it was usually color, in which case we were shooting slides for reproduction. And I just handed it over. There it was, done. Why did I do that? Because believe me, it was very, very unpopular back then. Very unpopular, because the business model was somebody would hire you to do pictures. Let's say they needed the pictures for a shelf talker in a supermarket. And this is one job actually that I did. It was for a food company that had a new chicken nugget product. And so we did a set of pictures on a rush that they wanted to be able to put on a little banner that was going to hang underneath the shelves in the frozen section of the supermarket. Great. So the normal business model back then was you would charge, X fee plus expenses, yada, 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 for doing that. And they would be able to use the image for that purpose for a set period of time. Any usage beyond that time, additional cost. Any repurposing the image, maybe in a magazine ad, maybe on a billboard, whatever, additional cost. Usage 2 years, 3 years, 4 years down the road, additional cost. So as a photographer, that meant that you were continually basically having to spy on and check on your clientele to see how they were using your pictures. It was a pain in the butt. I didn't pick up a camera, and I certainly didn't become a photographer because I wanted to have to keep track of everything people were doing with my pictures. Like, that's not where the enjoyment was for me. So work for hire for me was a great solution. And straight up, if I was shooting something and I thought to myself, this looks awesome, as long as I get this right, because remember back then, you took a picture and you waited 7 days to find out how bad you sucked, right? Okay. So if I'm shooting it and I'm thinking, this is great, I really want copies of this, I want it in my portfolio, and it was a work for hire job, I would just shoot extra frames. Simple. And if it was like sheet film where I was actually billing the client per sheet, I simply wouldn't bill them for sheets that I wasn't going to give them. Real simple. It was really, really easy to manage. So now, fast forward today, John Edward. The reason why I tell that story is one of the things that I think all photographers need to understand is there's no law or rule that says you can't give away raw files. However, you have to understand the ramifications, because understand that just because you hand a client a raw file, that doesn't mean that you're giving up copyright. That just means you're giving them the raw file to work with, right? So hopefully the contractual agreement that you made, whether that contractual agreement is with a contract, written up by an attorney, or simply an email exchange where you have taken the time and trouble to outline everything that you're doing, what they're paying, what they get for it, what they can do with it, etc. Either one, all you're doing is you're giving them the file so they can do those things. You, as the photographer, still own the copyright to those images unless you have explicitly granted them ownership of the copyright. Okay? So, John Edward, my advice to you would be, since we're in a digital age, and since it is very easy to essentially duplicate a file, right? So it's not like you have to shoot extra if you are thinking, well, I would like this picture for my portfolio. You don't have to shoot extra. You're just going to copy them, right? You're going to certainly charge that client additional monies for the fact that you are giving them the raw files. And then you've also got to be very clear via discussion and then in writing, what rights are they getting with the raw files? But I will tell you, in the last 20 years in the digital era, the overwhelming majority of corporate clients and commercial clients that I worked for, I did work for hire. And that is because they were companies that had digital marketing teams, that had graphics people, that knew how to create the ad work, that knew how to use Photoshop, that liked the images processed a certain way. So I was thrilled to not have to deal with that. And the best part of it is, I would give them the files. I charge them a little bit more because I'm giving them the original files. And then a couple months later, there would be this printed piece, whether it was a magazine ad or whether it was an ad or a billboard or a shelf talker or whatever, with my pictures on it that looked amazing. Then I didn't have to do anything except set it up and shoot it. And I frequently did grant copyright ownership with the caveat that I was allowed to use the images for my self-promotion and marketing. So you have to have those discussions in advance, and you have to put it in writing. So the idea that you have a client, John Edward, who is saying, raw files are more flexible, we'd really rather have the raw files, that indicates to me, and certainly it's not a guarantee, right? But it indicates to me they kind of probably know what they're doing with the raw files. They have a very specific way that they like to do things. So you should ask a few more questions about, what their process is, what they're doing, what their intended use is, and then you build them accordingly. But if you can make a client happy and do less work and even make a couple more bucks, well, then why would you not want to do that, right? That's my outlook. There are photographers today especially if they came up through the film era, that would aggressively disagree with my philosophy. But I stand by my philosophy. I'm not interested in having to continually negotiate and chase people for money and all that kind of stuff. Running a business is the worst part of photography for me. That's the part that I hate. I didn't fall in love with photography because I wanted to run a business. I didn't fall in love with photography because I wanted to have to type out invoices and I wanted to have to call clients and chase clients when they haven't paid me on time. That is not why I enjoy photography. So for me, the easier that I can make that, the simpler that I can make that, the better. I mean, hands down, anytime. So I hope that helps. But, you know, I think you have to have a little bit more of a discussion. But I would encourage you, maybe open your mind up to tweaking your business thoughts a little bit there. You might actually be able to make your life easier, keep a client happier, and make some more money all at the same time. Okay? All right. Let's see here. Eric Arnold, I saw a video where the host, wow, what does that lead me to think? I wonder who that may be. The host stated that to improve as a photographer, you should take 10,000 images a month. Will quality happen due to quantity, or should quantity, say 1,000 plus, be the main focus? Well, so first of all, Eric, look, I'm not going to lie. I am curious if this host actually said 10,000 images a month. Like, that's freaking ridiculous. It just is, okay? So let's back up for a second and let's put things in context, because that 10,000 number, there's some history in that. So if you don't know that, let me fill you in the history. And then obviously, Eric, it goes without saying, what works for me may not work for you, may not work for the next guy. So let's deal with that. Duke, how you doing, man? I hope to see you in New York too. We got to do our annual selfie, man. Okay? So the history, Eric, behind that 10,000 number, it comes from a quote from Henri Cartier-Bresson. Your first 10,000 photographs are your worst. That was the quote, okay? And by the way, folks, if you're watching my show, if you're passionate about photography, if you're serious about what you're doing, if you're serious about learning, and you do not know who Cartier-Bresson is, shame on you. Google it when we get done. And don't just Google and see what comes up in the results. Actually, go and read about the man's life, read about the man's career, and most importantly, study his work. Okay? So, that being said, getting back to the 10,000, image thing. So obviously, number one, that was a statement that he made back in the days of film, specifically roll film, right? So let's do a little bit of math, and I already have this done out. I'm not going to lie to you, because to do this off the top of my head, I'm not that good at math, right? So basically, 10,000 frames in 35 millimeter film. That's kind of the equivalent of like 300 36 exposure rolls of film, right? Which would also be like insanely expensive. Bresson. So here's the last name. So here, actually, I'll type the whole name in here for you. I see Mark asking the question. Bear with me one second. There you go. There it is. I just put it in the chat window so that you have the full spelling of his name. Seriously, any serious photographer, if you do not know who Bresson is, and if you have not studied his work and tried to learn from it, come on, you're missing out. You really are, okay? So anyway, 336 exposure rolls of film. So, that's a lot of film, right? So clearly Bresson was not referring to the idea that, you're supposed to shoot those 10,000 frames in a month. I mean, simply, guys, think about that. 10,000 frames in a month? Like, 10,000 frames in a month. Here, where's my calculator here? 10,000 frames in a month, that's like let's see here, get enough zeros, divided by 30. We'll go 30 days in a month. That's 333 frames per day, 7 days per week, right? That's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. So, and keep in mind that, depending on how many megapixels your camera is, one secure digital card will hold more than 10,000 images. So, Eric, this is definitely not a quantity thing. It's not a just, hold the button down, blow through the numbers and poof, magic happens. No. The point behind Bresson's statement was that, especially back in the day, and back in the day of film, every time you went click, every time, there was much more of a deliberate and intentional thought process that went into that click. So the idea of that 10,000 number, which I'm sure is a number he probably just pulled off the top of his head, but you know what? For most photographers that learned in the film era, they would agree with that number. They really would. And the fact is, it's that constant, and I don't mean constant daily, I mean constant picking up the camera time and time again, deliberate thought process and learning process and building and learning from your mistakes, learning how to solve problems. That's what gets you to the point that you are able to consistently create good quality work. You could take that quote from Bresson and move it forward today to people like me who tell you that you have got to practice and practice and practice. You need to pick up that camera and you need to shoot. Your best shot is your next shot, etc. Okay? So I assure you the quality is not going to happen because you're doing 10,000 images in a month. That's just excessive, and that's just pumping volume out, of which there's little to no learning value there. So I don't know who this host is. I don't really want to know Eric. It's better if I don't. That way I haven't insulted anyone specifically. But yeah, no. At the end of the day, you got to practice. I will say this, Eric, and Eric, you had another question early on, which you've already figured out I'm not going to answer because it's one of those clickbait questions that came from somebody else on YouTube. Eric, you need to stop watching damn YouTube videos. And I would honestly encourage you, if that's a question that you are sincerely asking me, or you were just curious to see if I would go off the rails. If you thought I'd go off the rails, well, sorry, didn't go off the rails. If you are really kind of perplexed by that question, seriously, man, you need to stop watching YouTube. And you need to stop watching me. You need to just go pick up your camera and enjoy photography. Like, so many of you would benefit from that, gang. You really just would. I appreciate you being here. I sincerely do. But go take pictures, right? So anyway, next up here, James Parrish. When trying to get published in your local or national magazines, what do you recommend as an approach to get published? Who should you reach out to? Specifically, he's saying fashion magazines. Well, so first of all, most of you don't have local fashion magazines. Let's just be clear about that, right? This is the kind of question that there is some legitimate information that can help you here, James, and I'm going to give you that. But at the same time, I'm going to call you out and say that's kind of a lazy question, right? So, I mean, think about it. So what do you recommend as an approach to get published? Well, first of all, why not just ask the magazine, right? If you have a local fashion magazine, why not contact them? You don't contact them with some, Facebook message or some email. It's like, how do I get published in your magazine? Which is what people do. It's pathetic that people do that, but that's what people do. People that do that are just plain lazy. But do a little bit of self-evaluation. Look at your work. Look at your work honestly. Look at your work critically. And compare it to the images that are in your local fashion magazine. Or, God forbid, if you think you're going to get published in Vogue, well then great. Go look at the images in Vogue. Is your work that good? Is it really that good? If it's really that good, then you need to have a website that is your portfolio that shows that work. Duh, right? And then contact them. I mean, how do we contact people in the business world today? Go to LinkedIn. Go to LinkedIn and search for employees for that magazine. Find out who the photo editor is. Make a connection. Have a conversation. Introduce yourself. Share with them the link, etc. Ask them if maybe they'd be willing to give you some feedback. At the end of the day, provide value, right? You have to provide value. If you're not providing value, nobody's going to care, because don't think they care about your photography. But James, here's the unfortunate news. Most fashion magazines don't pay. Sorry, pal. No money there. So if that's your goal, you're barking up the wrong tree. It's an extremely small percentage of fashion layouts in the most high end of magazines that make money. So I'll give you an example. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share a website and a link here with you guys. Here's a fashion magazine. Oh my God, and it did it again. So here, let me switch this over so that I can show you guys. Sorry, gang, I don't know why it keeps wanting to not show me the browser that I want, but let me see if I can get the right browser here. Bear with me. That's not the one. Let's try that one. That's not the one. All right, so I'm going to leave it right there and show it to you this way. So the magazine is called Lucire, Lucire. I'll share the URL with you guys. They are based in New Zealand. Lucire is a magazine that a lot of fashion photographers start with. It's where they get their first layout, so to speak, right? Part of the reason is they don't pay. So they're always taking submissions. So it's up to you as the photographer to find a stylist, to find a designer, to put together a layout worth of images and submit it to them. If it's good enough, they'll publish it. So that becomes now, are you willing to do all of that work, right? And then at the same time, we can go and we can click on the fashion link on their website. And whoops, I'm on the wrong browser. Going to say here, we can click on the fashion link on their website, and we can see, okay, so here's a layout they have about ready to wear. So you want to look at the quality of the work. You want to look at the types of images they have, and you've got to ask yourself the question honestly, am I able to do what is here? Because if you're not, don't make yourself look like an idiot, right? Don't make that connection. Don't reach out to them. So, at the end of the day, James, the challenge is making sure that you can honestly look at your work and say, I've got work that is of the quality that I'm seeing in those magazines. And be honest with yourself, right? Plain and simple. Because I'll be honest with you, even Lucire, which is a magazine that doesn't pay, they wouldn't accept my work. They wouldn't. I suck at fashion photography. Even though everybody uses the phrase fashion portraits when they talk about my stuff, that's because they're portraits that kind of look like fashion images. But if I was actually doing a fashion layout, I'm not a good fashion photographer. Absolutely not. Never claimed to be. So I probably wouldn't get published in that magazine. Now, do I understand what I need enough that I could probably put together a layout that would at least kind of maybe pass muster? Yeah, maybe. But I'm not a fashion photographer. So again, the challenge is you've got to make sure that you are honestly just being very honest with yourself about about the work that you were doing and does it really fit with what they're doing, okay? All right, so let me scroll back up here, see where we left off with that. Get the next question. Got some good questions coming in, guys. I've seen some good ones going through. Let's see here. And James wanted to ask, is it also, I'm going to assume you mean recommended that you pay for an editorial of your work? James, I'm not sure what you mean by that. Could you maybe rephrase that and give me a little bit more detail? Because honestly, I'm really not sure what you're asking me there, okay? From Darko, Joe, do you shut your IBIS off on any shots above 1/100th of a second to avoid the IBIS introducing shake or blur into the image? I've misstated this. Can you explain when it's best to have IBIS off? Read your camera manual. It depends. Honestly, it really depends. It depends on your camera. It depends on how the systems work, because different IBIS systems work differently. So the idea that people will say, well, you always do, even like the whole tripod thing. So my IBIS on my Olympus camera is turned on all the time. When I put my camera on a tripod, I don't turn the IBIS off. I just don't. And it works just fine, right? Some of you, though, can't do that. Some of you, that IBIS being on will introduce enough shake to activate the IBIS, which will cause you problems in your images. And can I tell you which brand or which camera? No, I can't. Read your camera manual. This is one of those things that's covered in your camera manual. Follow the guidelines. That's why your camera manual exists. It is written either by or with direct input of the research and development engineers that designed and built the camera. So yeah, just to always check with your manual. That's the best thing to do there. Don't listen to what some guy on YouTube tells you. Read your camera manual. That's the best thing to do. James Parrish again, since you're in a new studio, what are some things to look for when looking for studio space when coming from a home studio? It really depends on your needs, James. So for me, the big thing that I wanted I wanted a slightly bigger shooting area, and I wanted a higher ceiling. Those were my two primary criteria that I was after. Obviously, with the basement studio, I was limited with just under 8 feet height-wise, and I had about 27 feet of running space, but I was only about 13 feet wide. So when I found out about this building, which, as I've mentioned before, it's an old cigar factory that has been turned into artist lofts. For months, I had been checking out the website for spots that were open for lease, and they didn't have any that were particularly big. There was one that, by measurements at least, would kind of do the job, but it had just like 2 windows at the end, like what you see in the background here, but that was it. And I wasn't super excited by that. It's actually, as it turns out, it's the one directly next to me, okay? So finally, I made an appointment and came in to see the place, and literally, as the leasing agent was walking me around the corner, he stopped and he said, this one here on the corner just opened up. And I didn't think anything of it. I thought maybe it's bigger. That's about all that interested me. And as he opened the door, I peeked my head in and I saw that literally for almost 30 feet on this side of me are 8-foot tall windows with an exception of a 4.5-foot piece of brick right here, but all the rest of it's windows. I looked at the guy and I said, do those windows face north? And he's like, yeah. I was like, oh my God, like to die for. So, I mean, that was a bonus. And the reason why north-facing windows are a big deal, folks, in case you don't know that, north-facing windows don't get direct sunlight at any point in the day, right? Because the sun rises in the east, travels to the south, sets in the west, okay? And I know somebody's probably gonna tell me, well, in a different part of the world, it goes the other way. Maybe it does, sorry. But at least where I'm at, okay? Rises in the east, travels around to the south, sets in the west. So north-facing windows never get direct sunlight. So basically what you have is this massive softbox, right? I mean, other things, James, are the little things, the things that we kind of don't consider. So for instance, I was just about ready to sign my lease when I realized that this building doesn't have air conditioning. Summers in Pennsylvania get really hot and really humid. So I had to make sure that I was going to be able to get a portable unit that was going to be able to keep this space manageable because I'm shooting models. I got to worry about makeup. I can't have makeup running and all that kind of stuff. Electric. This space only has 4 electrical outlets, each with 4 plugs, but it's all industrial strength wiring and breakers and everything. So one of my big concerns was, is that going to be able to handle all my video lighting, everything else? So those were all things that I had to kind of look through. That was based on my specific needs. If you're going to lease a space, James, you need to know what changes can you make? Can you paint it? Can you hang things on the walls? What are you responsible for when you leave, if you do things like that? Insurances, especially in a building like this. Like I have a $2 million liability rider on this space. That was part of the terms of the lease. So regardless of what I already had, I had to have a $2 million rider to be able to show the signed paperwork and certificate to the building's owner to be able to get the signed lease. Those were all kind of requirements. So it's all about, be thorough, do your research. So many people, James, in all honesty, don't really need a studio. They need a place that is a studio that they can shoot in, but they don't need to own it. It depends on where you're located, of course, but more and more and more today, you're finding rental studios pop up, or you're finding co-ops where somebody's buying a studio and essentially you buy in like a membership. That membership gives you X number of hours per month of being able to use the studio for free, and then you get discounts for additional time as the month goes on, right? So I think honestly, if I had to kind of reprioritize everything I just said, I would say the first thing to really kind of pay attention to is, do you actually really need a studio? Certainly, it's nice to have a studio. It's nice to have a space that is your own. It's nice to have a space where you can, basically spread out, do your own thing, set it up your own way. Absolutely. But obviously, you pay a premium for that. If you're fortunate enough to find a place like this, where someone has turned it essentially into an artist community, where it's much cheaper, much more reasonable, that's certainly helpful. There are a lot of places like this that are cropping up around the country, actually, to try and preserve and promote the arts. So if you're fortunate enough to have something like that nearby, oftentimes there's a waiting list to get a space. So it's one of those deals where you might want to get on the waiting list so that when it happens, you have that opportunity. But really what you have to do, James, is you want to sit down and you want to imagine everything you want to do in there and ask yourself, how? How am I going to be able to do it? Will I be able to do it? Are there any rules against it, et cetera? Definitely don't make any assumptions in that regard. Okay? All right. Darko. By the way, your shirts are always cool looking. Maybe you need a Edelman photographer's lineup of casual wear. Well, I do have the Tog Swag t-shirts, so you guys should check those. In fact, if I probably don't talk about those nearly enough. Here, let me. I'm going to share the link. I'm not even going to try and pull the website up since I'm having browser issues here tonight. But here, let me. I'll share with you. There's the link to all the t-shirts. I will tell you, Darko, obviously we're not here to talk about clothing, but unfortunately the company that makes my shirts, the really cool ones everybody likes with the embroidery, they went out of business about 2 years ago. The shirts are getting old. So actually starting next week, you're going to see kind of a new look. I have settled in on a brand. I have settled in on a style. It is very different than the embroidered shirts. I think they're really cool, but it's very different. So next week, you'll get to see those for the first time, okay? All right, let's see here. Going back up, let me find that short question again so I know where I left off. Okay, scrolling down. Coolly, have I tried or seen anything about Luminar, the software that is trying to take on Photoshop and Lightroom? Yeah, it's awesome stuff, man. So I've got to give you kind of 2 layers to my feedback, right? So please try and understand where I'm coming from. If you are just starting out, if you are just getting started, you have to, you need software for post-processing, you're trying to learn, et cetera, et cetera. I would actually tell you, start with Luminar. Oh my God, yeah. They have done an outstanding job of building a user interface that is simple, easy, intuitive, very powerful. They've got some really, really cool new retouching tools that are about to come out. You might have been seeing some of the buzz on those. I have had the opportunity to try them. I do have one of the beta versions of Luminar 4. I will not tell you what I think of it yet. I will wait till it comes out, in all fairness, because I had to sign an agreement for that to happen. But there are beta versions out there, people talking about them all over the place. The crew that runs Luminar has done an outstanding job of building a program from the ground up and essentially from, I don't want to say reinventing Photoshop or Lightroom, but rethinking Photoshop or Lightroom. And actually, that's not even fair to them. I don't think that they rethought Photoshop or Lightroom. I think what they did is they rethought post-processing. And I think they did an excellent job at that, sincerely. And I'm not sponsored by them. I don't get any money from them, none of that stuff. I really believe that. However, here's where I think their challenge is. A lot of us, myself included, I have said these words, are they the Photoshop killer? Are they going to put Adobe on notice, yada, yada, yada? I don't think so. But let me explain why. And I think this is something that Luminar, and I can't speak for them, but from my observations, I think they're very aware of this. If you look at their marketing, all their ambassadors and that, for the most part, are very young, right? The way that they are going to find success, ultimately, and the way that they will potentially find domination, like Adobe, in the photography space, is by continuing to build a great product, which they are doing. I mean, they are literally revolutionizing how so much of this stuff works. But what they are going to need to do is to continue to grab the young audience that picks up a camera for the first time and indoctrinate them from the beginning into Luminar. People like me, who have been using Photoshop for about 25 years, I am so indoctrinated into Photoshop and how it works and the retouching tools and the techniques and frequency separation and all those things that while I respect and think that what Luminar is doing is incredible, I don't know that I have the mental patience to really completely relearn and rethink my post-processing from scratch. And I do know that while this new AI they are building for the retouching is amazing, it is still not a 100% replacement for all of the things that I do and the compositing work that I do in Photoshop. Getting darn close, but it's not all the way there yet. So could my tune change in a year or 2 years, Cooley? When they get to the point where they can literally, say, look, anything you can do in Photoshop, we can do it. There's a good possibility that will happen. I have said many, many times before on this show, I think that any photographer of any age in any niche of photography that is not paying attention to what Luminar is doing, I think they're making a big mistake. I really do. These guys are definitely, they're taking no prisoners. They are changing the process and going at it really, really well. So, but for me, it's not quite ready to make that change yet. Okay. All right. Scrolling on down here. Let's see. Okay. So DMAC asked me about New York. I am going to be at Photo Plus. That's right. Big of Boy 69. I'm an old school photographer that uses a light meter for everything. It's just the way I learned back in the film days. Why is it that photographers these days don't use them as much? Thoughts? So Big of Boy, here's honestly my first piece of advice. Since you use it, since you're comfortable with it, since you've always done it, don't worry about what photographers do. Worry about what you do. And I'm not trying to be a jerk. I mean, seriously, I wouldn't stress it. I learned back in the film days where you needed a meter, right? But also in the film days, because I did newspaper work and because when I started, the meters were the first thing to die on your camera. Because I'm so old, the first couple cameras I had, the meter was on the outside of the camera, on the front. So the meter got trashed in no time, right? So you had to learn as a newspaper photographer, you had to be able to learn to look at a scene and know what your exposure was going to be. And I was really good at that. It's the Sunny to f16 rule, but you had to be able to apply that indoors, outdoors, anywhere, at night, whatever, okay? So for me, moving over to digital, one of the things I love most about digital is that I can chimp. I can look at that preview and see what I've got. And now shooting mirrorless and having an EVF, for those of you that haven't made the jump to mirrorless yet, if you're using a DSLR or if you're using a film camera, you look through the camera through what is called an OVF, an optical viewfinder. For mirrorless folks, we are not looking directly through the camera lens like with an SLR or a DSLR. We are looking at a little TV screen, which is an EVF, an electronic viewfinder, right? What's great about the electronic viewfinder, when I'm shooting out on location, in the studio it's different, but when I'm shooting out on location, I'm seeing a finished image. Like I'm seeing the image at the actual exposure that I'm shooting at. So I don't even have to, shoot it and then chimp. I'm seeing it right there. So actually, Big Boy 69, at this point, I'm one of those photographers that hardly ever uses a light meter. I simply don't have the need because I still have the foundation of being able to look at a scene and essentially know where my exposure is going to be. The same with my strobes. If you've ever seen me do one of my talks, I'll set the strobe down, turn it on, set the power, and my first shot, I'll be within a half a stop usually of where I need to be, just because I've used them all the time and I have a sense of what they're going to give me at different distances. But then everything else I'm going to do it visually because at the end of the day, I don't want to rely on a piece of electronic equipment that can't see what I see. In the film days, we had no choice, right? That was our only option. We had to do that, and then we had to wait 7 days with our fingers crossed and hope that everything worked out all right. Now, we can see it right away. But, if your system's working for you, don't stress what the younger kids are doing, right? I think it's great that we don't have to, but at the end of the day, anybody that you show your pictures to, whether you're shooting professionally for a client or whether you're just shooting for yourself and you're going to show your pictures to a relative, they're not going to ask you if you use the light meter, right? So don't worry about it. So let's see here, scrolling on down. I see a couple people weighing in on the light meter thing. So Jeffrey Newman, is this a danger with mirrorless? Danger, mirrorless cameras. An LED screen right next to our eyes. Some on the web say yes, have manufacturers to protect us. Jeffrey, I have no idea, man. Here's the way I look at that stuff, right? If we listen to everything we read on the web about what's dangerous for us, you should go crawl into a box, never get out, don't breathe, probably not eat much, right? And I know I'm being a little sarcastic and I'm taking that a little far, but I'll be honest with you, I've never read anything that said that having the LED that close is a problem. So I'm not sure what to tell you there. I would say that after a long day of shooting, I have yet to have a situation working with a mirrorless camera where my eyes have been tired. So I do know, and this is a little bit of science now, I do know part of the science is, it's kind of like watching TV for too long. If that LED screen is causing issues, it will tire our eyes out because our eyes are going to have to work harder to deal with it. And if we pay attention, we are going to feel a little bit about that. But, could there be some negative impacts, Jeffrey? It's certainly possible. But I honestly, I have read nothing, seen nothing at all about that. I would have to say I'm not that concerned about it at this point. And believe me, I am pretty finicky about my eyes because I've worn glasses since I was 9 years old. I have a lazy eye, which means I'm almost legally blind in my right eye. So, and my eyes are not the same as what they used to be. So the problem that I also have is, I'm paranoid about, my eyes going really, really bad. I wear trifocals now. There's 3 lenses in these. I'm not happy about that. I don't like that. So all of that being said, if there was any real credence to it, I promise you, I would definitely be paying attention to it. But honestly, I've never read a single thing about it. So I'm not doubting you. But I would think that if there was actually a problem, there would be some physiological impact. In other words, just tiredness, from having to strain, or from it being too bright and, from having to kind of squint, whatever. But I think we'd have some physiological responses. So, but I will keep my eyes open now, no pun intended, just to, see if I can come across some of that information because I'm certainly curious, but I can't understand, at least off the top of my head, what would be an issue there, okay? Art in the dark. Do I know why mirrorless cameras cannot use AF assist the infrared beams of these flagship flashes? No idea. Yeah, no idea. I'm sure there's probably a good reason, but so I'm an Olympus Visionary, right? I'm a brand ambassador for Olympus. Their speed lights are nice, but I use Godox, right? And the big reason that I use Godox and not my Olympus flashes, if I was just a casual shooter or maybe just traveling and wanted something small and lightweight that would work with my camera and I didn't have to put a lot of thought into, then that Olympus flash would be perfect. Absolutely perfect, because they are incredibly well made. However, I'm in a situation where I'm using my flashes to do studio type lighting. I need more of a system. And I don't mean TTL crap. I mean, modifiers, all that kind of stuff. Flashes that interact, that can be controlled, and also have more power than a speedlight has. So for me, the camera brand flashes, unfortunately, they are just not really the answer as far as that goes. But I'll be honest with you, I really do not. I do not know. Sorry. Okay. So let's see here. Scrolling down. There's Duke's message about New York. Good. So let's see. Chuck, you were at my Charlotte event. Awesome, man. I'm glad that you enjoyed it. It was great to meet you. It was actually a great event. I had a really, really good turnout of people there. The models were awesome. Little warm Wednesday afternoon, but yeah, definitely a great time. So Ken Weiberg, I suck. I'm lucky I heard Ansel Adams. So you know what? Here's the thing. And honestly, Ken, I'm not picking on you at all. But I'm glad you kind of made that comment just to point this out, because I'm gonna own your comment. As a young photographer coming up through the ranks, I wasn't that interested in older photographers. There were some contemporary photographers that, and when I keep in mind, this was, way pre-YouTube days. So when I say contemporary photographers, these were the guys that were kind of the superstars in Popular Photography magazine or Modern Photography magazine, or they were in maybe American Photographer. Guys like Peter Turner, guys like Elliot Erwitt, guys like Bert Stern, okay? These were the guys that I was into. The older generation, you know, like the Ansel Adams and the Bressons and that, I was not interested in either because, well, you know, Adams was, you know, nature and landscape photographer. You know, Bresson, he was a people guide, but, you know, it was old school stuff, right? And I had no interest. And true story. So just to back that story up just a little bit, when I was in 7th grade, I've told you folks the story before about how my math teacher made me start taking pictures for the yearbook. And that's what really solidified my passion for photography. But I explained how I used to take my camera to school every day. And finally, my math teacher gave me 2 rolls of film and said, you're going to go take pictures for the yearbook. Well, I also took that camera to my social studies class. And my social studies class in 7th grade at Penndale Junior High School, part of the North Penn School District, was all about, for the entire year, 7th grade, we studied colonial America, the American Revolution, which, by the way, is my favorite time period in American history, in part because at the time, in 7th grade, I was scared to death of the teacher. He used a paddle. He was tough. We had homework every day. But guess what? I learned a lot from that man. But after about a week of taking my camera to class, finally, he looked at me one day as everybody was coming in and sitting down. And the camera was sitting on top of my books next to my desk. And he said, tell me about Matthew Brady. And I looked and I was like, who's Matthew Brady? And he's like, come on, really? Matthew Brady was a photographer. You don't know who Matthew Brady is? I'm like, no. He's like, okay, tomorrow, you're going to bring me a 2-page report on Matthew Brady, or I don't want to see that camera in this classroom for the rest of the school year. Literally, that's what he told me. So I went home that night, got my encyclopedia, and found out that Matthew Brady was part of the Civil War. I'm like, why the heck am I writing a report about Matthew Brady in the Civil War? This is a colonial America class. So I wrote the report, and it taught me something, though, because I actually found Matthew Brady fascinating. I mean, the story is just incredible. Didn't really turn me onto the Civil War that much. That was never my favorite time period, but his story was amazing. And that really taught me, like, pay attention. Pay attention to the experience of others. Pay attention to what they did, how they did it, how they solved problems. Because here's what makes all of those old photographers great. And believe me, that we could name photographers for hours. But what makes them great is none of them had the technology that I have. None of them had the kind of gear that I have. But yet all of them took images that will stand the test of time much more so than mine. So how did they do that? How were they able to accomplish that? How did their problem solving work? And that's really kind of what turned me on to learning about these people. So I promise you, Ken, you're not the only person that doesn't know these old timers and has never paid attention to their work. But believe me, if you really dig in, and not so much even about their photography, but so much about their life, about their progression, you'll be amazed how much you'll actually learn about photography in the process. What we do, I don't care if you are Ansel Adams and you're shooting Yosemite, there's a people aspect of it. In fact, do you guys know that Ansel Adams, very frequently, before he would do an image, for days or weeks in advance, he would go out hiking in that area. And he would take along, if he wanted to shoot, I've never been to Yosemite, I'm sorry, but if he wanted to shoot one of the big mountains at Yosemite, whatever it is, he would decide, am I going to shoot it in 5x7, 4x5, 8x10? So let's say he was going to shoot 5x7. He would take with him a notebook, a number 25 Ratten filter. For those of you that don't know what a Ratten filter is, those are the gel filters that we used to use back in the film days. And a number 25 was yellow, because yellow made the blue sky darker and made the white clouds puffier. So he would take a notebook with a pencil, a number 25 filter, and he would take a picture frame, not like a big wooden frame, a mat, the part that you put inside, and it would have a cutout in it, either 4x5, 5x7, or 8x10. This is all true story. You can Google it and check it out. And so he would hike, and he would use this frame. You know how movie directors do this? He would use the frame out here to imagine the shot, and he would take notes on the locations where he wanted to shoot. And also, he would take notes about how the light was at certain times of day so that he knew when to come back to get the best light in the best location for the best frame, or frame size, film size that he was going to use to shoot it. And that's how he did it. So there's a lot of problem solving involved there. Brilliant problem solving. Today, what do? We have apps. We have an app called Light Track that allows you to at least figure out a lot of that in advance. It still doesn't let you actually see it, but again, technology brings us forward, but it's interesting always to know where's the technology come from, and also understand how the technology still doesn't get the whole job done, because while I love the Light Track app, it's still not the same as seeing the actual location at the time of day that you want to shoot it in advance, right? The technology hasn't got us quite that far yet. It's getting there, but we're not there yet. So, it is worth, and it was this 7th grade social studies teacher who taught with an iron fist, literally, but what he did is he immersed us in, colonial America, and we learned an amazing lot. His name was Kirby Conrad, just an amazing teacher. We were all a little bit afraid of him because, indeed, if you were bad, you would either get the paddle or you'd have to do push-ups. Guys would have to do push-ups next to his desk. But we learned. And the Matthew Brady thing for me, it was another one of those moments where I felt like I was being punished. And really what he was doing is opening my eyes and making me realize that photography wasn't just something that just happened to me. It's been around. And the people that came before me actually have great lessons to share because of what they went through, because of the problems they solved. So that's, Alan Johnston, Douglas Kirkland. Oh my God, Douglas Kirkland is he's a living legend. I mean, the man is still alive. He's still with us. I would encourage you guys, if you don't follow him on Instagram, follow him on Instagram. Practically every day. I mean, just to give you a sense of how amazing Douglas Kirkland's career is. And by the way, if you don't know who Douglas Kirkland is and you shoot models, oh my God, shame on you. Come on, okay? But seriously, he took some of the most famous photos ever taken of Marilyn Monroe. He wrote a book where he talks about his interactions / relationship, not romantic relationship, but his interactions with her, incredible. But almost every day on Facebook, he posts happy birthdays to all the famous people that he's photographed throughout his career, living and past. And just to see some of these images, just absolutely amazing. I am incredibly honored. Douglas Kirkland is a Delkin image maker, of which I am also a Delkin image maker. And just to be mentioned on the same webpage as the man is amazing because his career is just incredible. So I encourage you guys as part of your learning process. Really to study. And I don't mean go watch some video, gang. Like actually do some reading. Look at their photography. Take the time to really look at their photography. You'd be amazed what you can learn from it. You really would, okay? All right, so let's see, scrolling on down here. Mike Zupanik, when putting together binders with your work to show others, is it best to put your top stuff in one or separate by genre with your best work of that genre and each and have multiple books? So Mike, I'm assuming, if you're still here, Mike, please give me some feedback while I'm talking about this, but I'm assuming you're wanting to do this primarily for fun, not profit, just the way you're saying that. Because honestly, in today's world, there are commercial advertising photographers and there are fashion photographers in New York that still do have actual book portfolios. Lindsay Adler talks a lot about her books that she ships off to editors and editorial directors at magazines. So it is still a practice that's in play, but it's a practice that's in play less and less and less and less. And these are not just simple binders of photos that she is putting together. These are incredibly well thought out, heavily edited productions that are being put together so that they make an impression not only for the photographs in them, but for the overall presentation itself. If you are doing this essentially for yourself to be able to show off your work to friends, relatives, whatever, organize them in the way that makes the most sense for you. Because if you are doing it to try and get work, in other words, if you intend to show these binders as portfolios to people, you are not going to want to have multiples. Clients at a higher level especially, they do not want to hire a jack of all trades. They are not going to be impressed that you can take a great portrait and shoot a sunset. That is not going to get you work. They want a portrait photographer that does the most amazing portrait work they have ever seen. So many photographers, new photographers, make this mistake not only with their portfolios, but also with their websites, which of course is the same as having your portfolio. They think that they have to show everything they've ever done. Nobody cares. You know, it's the same idea that you wouldn't hire a plumber to fix your electric. You wouldn't hire a roofer to do your driveway, right? And certainly if you have got detailed cabinetry work that you want done, you're not going to hire a handyman for that. You're going to hire somebody who specializes in that, who's going to be able to do a particularly good job on that work, right? So if you're looking at this for work purposes, Mike, being a jack of all trades is not a good idea. So the whole separating with genre, all that kind of stuff, no. Your portfolio should be very like hyper focused. If it's for personal uses, organize it in honestly whatever way makes sense to you, because really what you're doing is you're organizing your memories and the things that you've done. So here, actually, Mike just gave me a little bit more feedback here. He's saying not for business purposes necessarily, but your comments regarding showing only your expertise is what I'm looking for. Yeah, so you know, if you're hoping to make any money from it, don't be a jack of all trades, right? You know, be a master. That's what you want to be. So that's definitely you know, definitely important. Ken Weiberg mentioning David Kennerly. David Kennerly is my living idol. In fact, David Kennerly is the only living photographer, and I think probably the only photographer in the history of the United States. I'm pretty sure about this, so I'll say this because I don't think I've got it wrong. He is the only photographer in the history of our country who has photographed 10 presidents, starting with JFK. David Kennerly is a living, breathing, walking piece of American history. His career is amazing. And I had the good fortune. So back in the mid-1970s, 1976 in particular, after you know, Richard Nixon had left the office because of impeachment, and Ford had taken over. President Ford, Gerald Ford, was the first president to openly welcome a photographer into the Oval Office. And David Kennerly, for the first time in history, he had access. He came and went as he wished. He was privy to anything and everything that was going on, and he was able to photograph it, which was an incredible amount of trust that Gerald Ford put in him, which, you know, if you look at where his career has gone since being Gerald Ford's official White House photographer, it's very understandable that he has had this career because of that trust. But in 1976, when Gerald Ford was running against Jimmy Carter, I had the good fortune of getting an exclusive set of photos of Gerald Ford giving a talk in the Plymouth Meeting Mall in Plymouth Meeting, Pennsylvania. It's right outside of Philadelphia. One of the big media outlets had published an article that the Ford White House was not happy with. And as kind of the quiet punishment, because back then we didn't have the 24-hour news cycle, as part of the quiet punishment, they banned all the photographers from that event. I did not know that. I was 16 years old. I had just gotten my license. I drove with a friend after school to this mall. It was about 20 minutes from my high school, and we stood in front of the podium. We were the first ones there, literally. The ropes were up, the podium was there, and this was back in the day when you could actually get close to people. So I was literally like 8 feet from the podium. And the president was late in arriving. When he arrived, he came up to the podium, and I looked to my left, And there was David Hume Kennerly coming in his trench coat with his 2 Nikons on his shoulders and looking like Mr. Cool, because he was like totally Mr. Cool. And I had to keep reminding myself, take pictures, take pictures, take pictures. And as it turned out, I was the only photographer aside from David Kennerly that had images published from that talk. And not that it was a particularly momentous talk, but the next morning I dropped my photos off at my local newspaper because the photo editor there, or chief photographer, excuse me, was kind enough to look over my work and put notes on the back of the prints for me to help me improve. So I was very excited about the pictures. I went home that night, I developed them. The next morning on my way to school, I dropped them off at the paper. When I came home that day, I picked up the newspaper and there were my 2 photos, 6 columns across the top of the front page. And the byline didn't say photo by Joe Edelman. The byline said Associated Press photos by Joe Edelman. So it's like, pff, so cool. But yes, and David Kennerly is in the process of creating, he's gotten some grant money, and he's in the process of creating the Kennerly Archives. He won his first Pulitzer at age 23 for his work in Vietnam. Some of the most incredible imagery that you'll ever see. So yeah, I'm a huge David Kennerly fan. It's exciting because I'm friends with him on Facebook. I follow him on Instagram. Yeah, just absolutely awesome. So again, I encourage you people, really, there's so much that you can learn from these photographers that came before us. And you know how I often talk about things like high-speed sync and overpowering sun and all that kind of stuff? It's not that it's bad, it's just that, you know, you should understand how to do it without the convenience feature. Because if you understand how to do it without the convenience feature, you can actually make the convenience feature work so much better for you, right? And so in studying these photographers, you learn so much more about really how they solve problems and how things were done, which actually makes it easier and more effective to use the tools that we have today. So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox there, but yeah, Kennerly, amazing. I encourage all of you, because the man he is a living piece of American history. If you turn on CNN, anytime they show the still picture of Trump where he's kind of got his head down a little bit, it's a portrait, they use it in tons of stuff. That's a Kennerly picture. It was the cover of the book that CNN did about the Trump election, all that kind of stuff. So just, yeah, awesome stuff. So, okay. All right, Germano. Sometimes when I like a photo and give it to the customer, see that she's posting other photos that I didn't like very much. And then Germano adds, what aspect is important to say that one photo is better than another if the client has other life experience and other likes? What is your thought about that? Well, Germano, if the client likes a different picture, they like a different picture. If you're worried about it, like if you don't want that to happen, don't give them the pictures you don't like. That's one of the easiest solutions, right? I'll admit I'm very careful about giving out images that I don't feel would represent me well. So that gives me a little bit of control, kind of over what goes out the door in that regard. But if you're comfortable giving the images out, then the fact that somebody else likes it, understand that, 2 photographers could stand shoulder to shoulder, same camera, same lens, and say, okay, we're going to take this picture. Ready? 1, 2, 3, go. Click. You're still going to have 2 different pictures, and each photographer will still have a different experience, right? No 2 people are going to have the same experience. And as photographers, what you're describing, Germano, is something that I talk about a lot. When we give our photos to the world, or in your case, your clients, we have to be willing to learn to let go of them and understand that no one else, including that client, including the subject of the picture, will have the exact same experience as we did, right? They just won't. So, if it's something where you're concerned about certain photos being used, then don't deliver those photos. Keep those to yourself, okay? Jacob, on sharing raw files, going back to the question that John Edward had earlier, I do a lot of weddings and family portraits, and my colleagues are often afraid that the client will either be unable to open them or will share them unedited and complain. Well, okay, so Jacob, there's a couple things here. Now, number one, and I don't know for sure, but John Edward's here, so he can confirm. I won't assume. We'll let John Edward confirm. I don't think that John Edward was referring to a wedding or a portrait client. I have a feeling he was talking about a commercial client. I would be the first to tell you, Jacob, that as a wedding photographer, a portrait photographer, you should not be delivering digital files. That should not be your primary product. Simply because you're not really providing value and you're not making a lot of money. And you are giving up all control over the quality of your work. I don't care about where it gets used. I'm talking about the quality. Photographers who are doing portraits and weddings and making big money, they're selling prints, guys, right? I mean, they just are. That's where the money's at. The profit is in the prints, not taking the pictures for portraits and weddings. That's a big part of why I gave up shooting portraits and weddings, because to be a really successful portrait and wedding photographer, you have got to be a good salesman. You have to sell prints and albums, period. So really kind of my concern there with your statement, Jacob, is that, yeah, if we're talking weddings and portraits, no way in hell I would ever deliver raw files, ever, period. Because I'd be giving up too much money. So when I was referring to being willing to do work for hire, so I should have clarified this, I'm sorry, but yeah, and John Edward actually just chimed in. He was talking about a commercial client chain restaurant, okay, in his case. For portraits and weddings, if you want to make money, you got to do prints. You just do. That's where the money's at, not in shooting the pictures, okay? On the commercial side of it, that's a whole different ballgame because you're able to, you've got to be able, to demand more money for that type of work because it's actually going to be a lot more work involved and a lot more time involved. So, Zavonimir, north-facing windows are a must for the art of portraiture and the control of natural light. Rembrandt had them, Titan, Sargent, all the greats. Yeah, I don't know that I would put myself in that category by any means, but yeah, north-facing light is just amazing. There's just so much that you can do with it. It's actually great to work with. So let's see here. Adam B, is it possible for a camera to catch a virus from a computer? Why do I feel like I should respond with a joke at that point? I won't. If so, how would you fix it? A roommate hooked my Ollie E30 to a badly infected computer and it's had random faults ever since. Well, I'm not going to lie to you. Number one, I don't know if that's possible, Adam. I don't understand enough about the firmware update process to say yay, nay, whichever. But I would say since it's an Olympus, send it back to their customer service. There may be a fee involved because that's kind of not a warranty thing. And plus, if it's an Ollie E30, it's obviously out of warranty, right? But I would send it back and have them basically reset it, reinstall everything fresh. But what you may want to ask first is reach out to their customer support team go to the, getolympus.com/support. Reach out to their customer support team. I'm not sure if it's actually possible for that to happen. So I would talk to them about that first, see what they think. They're not just going to take your money. They'll give you feedback and tell you if you, should send it in or not send it in. So, okay. Lover guy in your Minolta. Yeah, I know, Lehigh Valley Railroad guy, but I hope your daughter's there. So, all right, so let's see. And scrolling on down here. Andrew, what brand of CTO gels do I use? Everything I use for gels at this point is MagMod. Just like super, super simple. So yeah, I use those for pretty much everything, okay? So Eric, any nuggets to share on any new Olympus releases? All I know is what I've read in, the rumor sites. What I do know, because I can tell you this, I just recorded a video for it. It's going to be an Instagram video, like one of their stories. October 12th is the official 100th anniversary of Olympus. So I just did a happy birthday, it's literally a 15-second long happy birthday video. But I do know earlier in the year, Olympus did promise that there would be some additional releases this year. We are as visionaries and now the new explorers and educators, we are ambassadors for the company, but we are usually not let in advance on that stuff. If there are new products coming out, there are always one or two people that have been asked to produce images with them, so they will have used them. Like when the EM1X came out, I had it a couple weeks in advance to work on my video and some other stuff. But I can tell you honestly, I have no advanced gear at this point. So yeah, I really don't know. Historically, what do we do know? We do know that historically camera companies tend to release stuff in October prior to the Photo Plus trade show. So, and that's what the Micro Four Thirds rumor sites are indicating. So we'll see. Who knows? But honestly, I really don't know. Sorry. Okay. Let's see here. Scrolling on down. Paco, when you use Olympus Capture, when you tether, do you use Olympus Workspace to review your images, or do you use a different software? Any recommendations? I'm new to tethering. So I got to give you two answers, Paco. Up until very recently, I would use Olympus Capture to tether, and then I would use Adobe Bridge to review any images that I needed to kind of go back and look at, because you can only basically look at your last shot in Olympus Capture. It doesn't have like a browse feature. Olympus Workspace is really pretty awesome, and it works really seamlessly with Olympus Capture. So recently I've been using Olympus Workspace in place of Bridge while I'm tethering to be able to do any quick reviews or even any quick edits to get a feel of how is the image going to look. I'm still an Adobe guy. Like I was talking about before, Luminar, you know, the Olympus Workspace is actually an amazing piece of software, especially considering that it's free. But I'm just so indoctrinated into the Adobe environment that it's not a reflection of Olympus Workspace. It's simply a matter of what I'm most accustomed to. But more recently, I've been using Workspace combined with Olympus Capture while in the studio shooting, just to be able to review files, manage things. But then when I go back home, or when I'm done and I start my actual post-processing, I'm right back to my Adobe software at that point. And that could change, but for now, that's still it. So where we at time-wise? All right, we can see if we can get through these here. Sam, currently shooting a Sony. I'm sorry to hear that. For my work and do Sony for my work to do stills, but mostly video. I'm looking at making soft Olympus. Can I recommend a camera body? Look in the EM1X at this stage. Well, wow, an Olympus Curious Sony user. Yay! So, Sam, I would tell you actually to look at two cameras, right? In all honesty, based on what you're saying, okay? Look at the EM1X. Yes, that's kind of the top of the line, high end. But I would also encourage you to look at the EM1 Mark II. Same sensor in them. Certainly you pick up some additional image stabilization for video, which is really nice with the EM1X, but it also is a little bit bigger, heavier, pricier, etc. Compare both. It's very interesting because the EM1X, everything I said in my video when it came out, the technology that is in that camera is just mind-blowing. And what it represents in terms of where the industry is going, where cameras are going to go, it's off the charts. And that's not about being better than anybody else. That's just, it's amazing technology. It's technology that does not exist anywhere else. So I love the camera. I love what it does. But I will tell you straight up, form factor, for me as a portrait photographer, the EM1 Mark II, it is a sweet little camera. It just is, right? So, you're mentioning here, Sam, that you're going to need two of them. If the EM1 Mark II, Eric, thank you so much, man, for the super chat. I appreciate that. I really do. Sam, if the EM1 Mark II fills your needs, you can actually save yourself a lot of money, buy a couple more lenses, and you'll thank me later, right? So the good part is, Sam, if you're in the United States, it's really inexpensive to rent them. And if you have a local photo retailer, like I don't know where you're located, Sam, but if you have a photo retailer near you that sells Olympus, go there. And even if they can't let you borrow the cameras for a weekend, even if they don't rent them, take a secure digital card, and in the store, they'll let you try the cameras out there. So shoot some video clips, shoot some stills, and then go home. And Pixel Peep, oh, you're in Australia? Sam, I'm sure there's got to be retailers in Australia that do it. I know Olympus has a huge presence in Australia. They've got a huge visionary team. If you don't have any local photo retailers that will allow you to do something like that, Sam, reach out to me through social media later in the week, and I will see if I can get you some contact information. But honestly, in Australia, and especially in the bigger cities, you've got to have photo retailers down there. Start with the photo retailers. And even if they can't let you borrow the gear, go ahead and go to a retailer and try it out. I don't know if Olympus in Australia does it, but Olympus in Europe, because these are all kind of like separate companies under the big parent company, right? Olympus Europe does events where you can actually try out a camera for free for a weekend. And they let you borrow a lens, the whole bit. They're starting to roll that out in some locations here in the US, but very, very limited right now. So, we're kind of keeping our fingers crossed that they'll try it here, because I think it would be very, very successful here. But if there's absolutely nothing that you can come across with down there, Sam, let me know, and I'll see if I can track down any information, from here that I can at least point you into the, point you in the right direction. Okay. All right. Let's see here. Glenn Johnson, on a sunny day, why do people keep on metering for their next shot when the sun does not change? For any number of reasons, Glenn. If they're working on automatic, they need to pay attention because, just a slight change of composition can throw it off. If you're working in mirrorless, you definitely don't need to, but some people are also just a little bit, I don't mean it in a bad way, but kind of neurotic, a little bit anxiety filled, and they want to be sure that they've got it right. And honestly, there's nothing wrong with that. At the end of the day, if they're getting good results, that's okay. But in theory, do you need to? Yeah, if the sun's not changing every 5 minutes, do you need to keep checking your meter? No, in theory, you don't. Back in the film days, we certainly didn't. But that kind of doesn't make it bad, right? So it's kind of one of those things, as long as it works, it works. So, all right, so let's see here. Scrolling on down, we got a couple minutes left. Let's see if I can get a few more in. Let's see here. Oh, that's interesting. So I'm hearing here Canon recently identified a vulnerability to malware and it's releasing firmware updates. Yeah, I'll be honest, I've never heard of that. Let's face it, they're computers, right? So it's certainly possible. So yeah, I would definitely go ahead and reach out to Olympus and see what they have to say, especially since it's an older camera, in that sense. Okay. All right. So scrolling on down here. So Mark weighed in here. The Olympus reps in New Zealand should be able to get contact information. Yeah, I do know that Olympus in Australia, in that they are very active, very proactive company. So I'm confident that you would be able to find some information from them. Abby, everyone talks about the EM1 and the EM5. What about the EM10 Mark II? I'm using it now, and I'm wondering whether it works with the Pro lenses. Oh, of course it works with the Pro lenses. Heck yeah. Oh yeah, it'll work. So it'll work with any Micro Four Thirds lens. So you can definitely do that. Okay. In Perth, Australia, Leaderville camera. So good. So actually, yeah, this is the great thing about crowdsourcing. People from all over the world. So that's awesome. So Sam, hopefully one of those is close to you. But if not, indeed, check Facebook for Olympus Australia. Like I said, throughout the world, there are kind of, mini Olympuses. So there's Olympus America, there's Olympus Australia, there's Olympus. There's a bunch of them in Europe. So it's not like Olympus Europe. There's Olympus UK. There's a bunch, right? And they basically all answer back to the parent division, which of course is Japan, okay? And it's kind of neat what they do. So Olympus Japan actually has people from Olympus Japan that work for like a year or two at a time in each of the various places. So they rotate around. So they'll go overseas, they'll work for a couple of years, and then they go back. So like Olympus here, there are employees from Japan in each one of the branches, like marketing and all that kind of stuff, that are from Japan that, they'll be here for a couple of years and they go back to Japan and then they switch out with somebody else. So it's actually really neat. I mean, it's truly it's a worldwide operation. It's amazing how all of these camera companies work. It really is. It's kind of geeky, but it's neat. Like I just find it fascinating how they're able to do that. I mean, it's truly, the world is much smaller than it used to be, thanks to all of this technology that we have. So, all right, gang. So, am I actually caught up? I am all caught up. So, that being said, I'm actually going to finish a couple minutes early for the first time in probably 2 years. You ready? So, we're going to do this. All right. I'm going to thank you all for coming out tonight. It was great to see you. Next Wednesday, we'll be back. In fact, what is the date next Wednesday? I just want to check something out here really quick so that I make sure I'm on top of this. Yeah, so next Wednesday is the 9th. Cool. Next Wednesday, we'll be back. You guys can see the new shirts that I was talking about. They'll be here. Got a couple other announcements coming up. If Olympus comes up with anything on their anniversary date, which is the 12th, we'll be able to talk about that next week. So I'll let you know. But one way or another, there's always going to be new stuff, right? So you guys know the drill. We talked about it a little bit tonight. Go out and take pictures, because apparently some idiot on YouTube says that you've got to take 10,000 bad pictures a month. Really? Anyway, thank you so much. Whatever you do, gang, as always, please remember these.
Thanks for watching another live episode of TogChat. Now, pick up that camera and shoot something, because your best shot is your next shot. So keep learning, keep thinking, and keep shooting. Adios.